There's a phrase that's been echoed in countless social media posts, therapy sessions, and self-help reels. You don't owe anyone an explanation. It's empowering, isn't it? It tells you you're allowed to choose silence, walk away, protect your peace. No justification needed. But here's the strange thing. The less we explain, the more we feel misunderstood. The more we claim our silence, the more distant we become. And slowly, without meaning to, we start living inside a version of freedom that feels a lot like loneliness. You leave a relationship without saying why. You ignore a message, assuming they'll get the hint. You change, grow, shift, and you tell yourself, I don't owe anyone the story behind it. And maybe that's true, but maybe it's also true that some stories, when left untold, quietly build walls between us. So today, I want to sit with you in this tension, not to give you an answer, but to offer 3 quiet stories each from someone trying to live by that phrase. One believed in it so much, she disconnected from everyone. One pushed against it so hard, he lost himself. And one found a middle path. Let's begin with the one who believed too deeply and watched her world fall silent in return. Her name was Lindsey. She lived in Austin, worked remotely as a freelance content writer, and on the outside, her life seemed wonderfully self-directed. No boss breathing down her neck, no office politics. Just her laptop, her playlists, and her peace. After a painful breakup at 24, Lindsey made a quiet vow to herself. I'm done over-explaining. I'm done justifying who I am or what I feel. That breakup didn't just break her heart, it shattered the part of her that still believed people deserved explanations. At first, it was little things. She ghosted a friend who kept texting about brunch plans, left a group chat without warning because the energy felt off, started ignoring phone calls, even from her mom. Then it became bigger. She quit a client project without notice because the tone of one email rubbed her wrong. She declined an invitation to her cousin's wedding and didn't bother to reply with a reason. To Lindsey, this wasn't rudeness, it was freedom. She told herself, they'll be fine. I don't owe anyone an explanation. And for a while, it felt good. No drama, no confrontation. No emotional labor, but over time, the silence began to echo. Her phone, once a stream of texts and memes, went quiet. She stopped getting tagged in photos, invites, updates. Even her birthday, usually flooded with love, felt like a polite afterthought. Then came the moment that cut deepest. She opened her Instagram one morning and saw that her closest friend, Madathy, one who'd brought soup when she was sick, who'd helped her move, who'd once cried with her on the kitchen floor, had unfollowed her. Lindsey stared at the screen. No text, no goodbye, just gone. She wanted to scream, how could you do this without telling me why? But of course, that was exactly what she had done to everyone else. It was as if the world had quietly given her back exactly what she believed in. No one owed her an explanation either. One evening, she came home to find her roommate had moved out. The apartment was half empty. A note on the fridge read, "Didn't want to disturb you. I figured you'd prefer space." Nothing more. That night, Lindsey sat in the silence she had once protected so fiercely. And for the first time, she wondered, was I creating boundaries or building walls? She texted her mom, "Hey, just wanted to say I miss you." Her mom replied almost instantly, "I never stopped waiting for that message, honey. In that moment, Lindsey realized freedom without connection is just another kind of prison. And maybe not owing someone an explanation doesn't mean they don't deserve one. Sometimes offering a piece of your truth isn't about permission, it's about care. Lindsey's story isn't uncommon. Many of us have walked away in silence, believing it to be strength. But what if silence isn't always the safest place? What if it's just the quietest form of escape? Because for every Lindsey who disappears without a word, there's someone else on the other side of the silence. Still waiting, still wondering, still hurting. But not everyone chooses silence. Some swing the other way entirely. They explain everything, constantly, desperately, and in trying to be understood by everyone, they slowly lose the understanding of themselves. Let me tell you about one of them. His name was Jacob, 28, high school English teacher, living in Denver. Unlike Lindsey, Jacob had never left anyone without a word. He was the type to send follow-up messages after a conversation. The kind who would apologize for sounding tired even if he was just tired. His friends used to tease him about his mini essays, saying, "Man, you could have just said I'm running late, not write a paragraph." But Jacob couldn't help it. He felt responsible for other people's feelings, like it was his job to make sure they never misunderstood him. He explained when he was quiet. He explained when he was loud. He explained when he needed space, then explained why he needed space, and then apologized for needing it in the first place. To Jacob, clarity was kindness. But slowly, something shifted. He started dating a woman named Elise. Smart, confident, independent. She liked Jacob's sensitivity at first, said it felt refreshing. But as time passed, something changed. One night, after Jacob sent her a long message explaining why he seemed distracted during dinner, Elise replied, "I care about you, but Jacob, it's exhausting. Not everything needs an explanation. Sometimes I just want to be with you, not decode you." That hit him hard. He realized that what felt like transparency to him felt like emotional clutter to her. So he tried something new. He pulled back, stopped over-explaining, kept things short, detached. He thought, maybe this is what people mean by boundaries. But instead of feeling stronger, he felt invisible. Like he was playing a version of himself that didn't fit. Quiet, composed, emotionally neat, but not fully there. At work, students noticed it too. He wasn't the same teacher who used to linger after class for deep talks or write encouraging comments in the margins. He was still kind, still reliable, but something about him had gone dim. One day, a student lingered behind after class. A quiet kid named Marcus, who usually kept to himself. He looked up and said, "Mr. J, I like your class. You always make time for us. That's rare. Please don't stop being like that." Jacob didn't know what to say. That small, honest moment cracked something open. He'd been so afraid of being too much that he became less than himself. That night, he went home and wrote in his journal, "Maybe I don't owe the world an explanation, but when I care, I explain not to be understood, but to be known." Jacob started rebalancing, not oversharing, not under-communicating, just being present. He still explained things, but not from guilt, not from fear, from intention, from choice. And in doing that, he found something Lindsey didn't. Connection without compromise. Clarity without apology. There's something we can all learn from Jacob's story. That explaining isn't weakness, it's the why that matters. Some people disappear to protect themselves. Some people over-explain to be accepted. But what happens when someone sees the weight of both and chooses neither? Someone who learns to speak not for validation, but with discernment? Let me tell you about Sofia. She was 30, living in Chicago, and working as an immigration lawyer. She carried herself with quiet strength, graceful but firm. The kind of person who didn't raise her voice to be heard. But somehow, everyone still listened. Sofia didn't vanish like Lindsey. She didn't over-explain like Jacob. She had learned through years of trying and failing that communication is not about how much you say, but about when and to whom you choose to say it. When she was younger, Sofia had tried the people-pleasing route. She used to over-justify her choices to her parents, especially her mom, who never fully understood why Sofia chose law over medicine, or why she turned down a prestigious corporate firm to work with refugees and low-income families. Every time she made a life decision, she'd come home to questions: why not take the safer job? Why live in that neighborhood? Why are you always helping strangers instead of securing your own future? At first, she tried to explain. She wanted her mom to understand the fire in her gut, the deep purpose behind her work. But no matter how well she put it, the answers never seemed to land. Eventually, she stopped trying. But she didn't walk away. She just shifted how she engaged. When her mom asked why she still hadn't bought a house, Sofia smiled and said, "I'm building a different kind of stability." That was it. No long explanation. No debate. Just a sentence with love and a clear boundary. She didn't withhold to punish. She simply learned to speak in ways that honored both her truth and her peace. But she wasn't silent with everyone. Her best friend, a fellow lawyer named Rima, knew everything from the stress of court hearings to the doubts that crept in at night. Sofia explained herself freely there, not because she owed it, but because she trusted the space. Same with her partner, Alex. One night, during a tense moment about the future of their relationship, Alex said, "You don't have to tell me everything you're feeling right now." Sofia replied gently, "I know, but I want to, because this matters." And silence, even if I have the right to it, would feel like distance. That's what made Sofia different. She didn't confuse silence with strength. She didn't explain to prove herself. She chose when to open up and with whom. To the world, she was composed. To her people, she was transparent. And in that balance, she built something rare. A life of both clarity and connection. There's a quiet kind of wisdom in Sofia's story. She didn't believe that not owing anyone an explanation meant never offering one. She believed it meant having the right to choose, and using that right not as a wall, but as a window she could open when it mattered. She taught us something both Jacob and Lindsey struggled with. That communication isn't about proving anything. It's about choosing when and how to share your inner world so others can meet you there, without stepping all over your space. But there's still a bigger question here. Something deeper. Because whether you're like Lindsey, Jacob, or Sofia, you've probably felt the tension between speaking up and staying silent. Between protecting your peace and risking vulnerability. Between explaining and not. So maybe the real question isn't, should we explain ourselves? Maybe it's something else entirely. Let's go there. By now, we've seen 3 versions of the same paradox. Lindsey used silence like a shield. Jacob used words like a safety net. Sofia used discernment like a compass. But here's the deeper truth. Most of us don't stay in just one version. We move through all three. There are days we want to disappear. There are days we overshare, hoping someone will say, "I understand." And sometimes, if we're lucky or just honest, we find the wisdom to pause and choose who deserves to hear our truth. But let's pause here, because maybe there's something we haven't considered. We say, "You don't owe anyone an explanation." And that feels powerful. It feels protective. But have you ever been on the other side of that phrase? Have you ever cared about someone who left without a word? Someone who changed, pulled away, shut you out, and when you asked why, they simply said, "I don't owe you anything." It stings, doesn't it? Because while it's true that no one owes us their story, being denied, it still hurts. And maybe that's the paradox no one talks about, that the freedom to remain silent is only powerful until we're the ones who need someone to speak. So maybe this isn't just about boundaries or communication styles. Maybe this is about how deeply we want to be known and how deeply we're willing to let others know us. Because in the end, it's not about owing. It's about choosing. Choosing to stay. Choosing to speak. Choosing to love in ways that require a little more risk and a little more clarity. And that brings us to the final question. Not a conclusion, not a lesson, but something to sit with. Quietly, we live in a time where silence is celebrated as strength, and explaining yourself is often mistaken for weakness. But as we've seen, saying nothing can be an act of self-respect and also a quiet form of disconnection. Explaining everything might come from kindness, but sometimes it erases us. And choosing when and how to speak, that's not just communication, that's growth. You don't have to speak all the time, but when you do, let it build a bridge, not a barrier. You don't owe anyone an explanation, but if you choose to offer one, may it come from clarity, not fear, from care, not insecurity. And maybe, in the end, we don't need to be fully understood. We just need someone willing to hold a piece of our truth without demanding all of it. In an upcoming video, we'll explore a phrase that many have taken to heart, a phrase that teaches us kindness should have no limits. But what if limitless kindness is what quietly breaks us? You've probably heard the quote, but this time, we'll look at it from a place of strength you didn't know was there. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this video stirred something inside you, perhaps that's all it needed to do. Until next time, softly and completely